Good evening and welcome to the 31st At Right Angles webinar. At Right Angles, as you know, is a publication of Azim Premji University and Community Mathematics Center. It is a school mathematics resource and we've been publishing since 2011. We feature this time a series of articles from the 2016 issues, and these articles were authored by Geetha Venkataraman. Geetha is a professor of mathematics. She has broken the barrier about women in mathematics, an issue which she is deeply invested in. Geetha is also interested in issues related to mathematics education and has served on several curriculum development boards at the school, undergraduate, and postgraduate level. Geetha, it's a pleasure to have you here on the webinar with us, and welcome. You
Thank
are one
you
of,
so much,
yeah,
Sneha. Thank you.
you're one of the iconic mathematics teachers in Delhi colleges, right from when you taught at St. Stephen's between 1993 and 2010, right?
That's
To
right.
your present stint at Ambedkar University. So I am actually not going to talk about the facets which I introduced you with, but I'm interested on the one in which you urge students to don spectacles capable of discerning symmetry in our daily life and to use such a device to appreciate the many examples that prevail and that are so filled with symmetry. I'm quoting from your article. And I want to know, why do you feel that it is important to don these spectacles?
Mathematics often, is not seen as fun, especially in school for a large number of children. And I feel that symmetry is one way in which you can combine mathematics, beauty, and fun all together. And it's something that can be done at all levels, including sort of playing with designs or cutouts with little babies, little children, to middle schoolers, high school, secondary school, and college as well. I mean, it's one of those topics in mathematics which transcends levels, and it's something that's there around us. So easy examples are available. It's just a matter of learning very few basic things, and then intuitively knowing what a symmetry is, and then you can just have a huge explosion of fun. So it's the best way in my mind to show that you can do interesting mathematics, which need not scare you, and it's a lot of fun. You can do things with your hands, you can envision things, and so on. So it's a beautiful area to get immersed in, and hence the spectacles.
Yeah, I mean, it's so reassuring to hear you say this because one would expect that a professor of mathematics would talk about blackboard, chalk, dusty theorems, long proofs, and here you're talking about having fun. So, to talk with you about that, I'm going to also introduce a person who actually needs no introduction to At Right Angles webinars, Swati Sircar, my colleague at Azim Premji University, and guide in several mathematical adventures. I am so happy to have you here and to have you talk to Geetha about symmetry. Okay. First of all, it's a topic which is relatively new to textbooks to the mathematics textbooks. So why is it important in real life as a topic in school and pedagogically? Why? I'd like you to just briefly touch upon these three angles. Swati, yeah, I
But
think
you
you're
need
on.
to unmute.
Okay, let's see. Pedagogically, textbook, and in real life, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay. Um, let's start with let's start with real life and then take it from there. Um, have you noticed how a tailor cuts the cloth
I've done
and
some tailoring, so I know that he folds.
yeah, so like, does the tailor use any symmetry? Does
Of
the
the human
potter
body.
use any symmetry?
Uh,
Okay, and these two are some of the crafts that we have been doing for centuries. Okay, on the other hand, have you noticed how if you take out the battery in in your mobile or from your camera, um, there are those grooves which are supposed to match, right?
yeah.
They are usually not at the center in a symmetric position. And so,
Okay.
by mistake, if you put the battery in a different orientation, it's not
Wow.
going to work.
Uh,
Okay, so why is it deliberately kept asymmetrically? So,
okay.
there are many uses of application of symmetry and asymmetry which is there. And at any point, if you're designing something, then a thorough understanding of symmetry will help you create something easily.
You've
Okay.
convinced
Uh,
me. You've convinced me.
and so because of this importance, it has entered textbook as well as all the things that Geeta said, especially the fun part.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Pedagogically, also, I feel that you can use symmetry to understand many of the properties.
Hmm. Hmm.
I mean, Euclid did things in certain way. Okay, but we don't have to go through exactly the same way to understand the properties of the shapes.
Okay.
And symmetry can really help. It will be more intuitive, and then we can use that.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, it's a kind of cycle. You are using it, but you become aware of how you are using it, right?
Yeah.
Thanks. As you all can see, they both have a lot to say, and in our preliminary discussion, there was just so much animated conversation happening that I just want to listen. So I am going to hand over the stage to both Geeta and Swati, and let them have a conversation about symmetry, which I, for one, am anticipating with great enjoyment.
Yeah.
Geeta,
Yeah. So, Swati, it's us now. And
Yes.
maybe should I start with a little presentation
Yes,
on
I think that would
based,
be a good
based,
idea.
based on what I had said a little bit in the articles, and then we can continue our conversation from there. So
Yes.
I will try and set up my presentation. But one of the things that you mentioned, which is that um, you can learn the about shapes and so on from just a moment. Let me. I'm not good at talking as well as getting to present. So let me organize the presentation first, and then oops, just give me a second. Technology is great, but it's sometimes far smarter than we are. That's the only problem. So you know um, sorry, I'm having a little bit of trouble despite all the practicing we did. Okay. So I think now I should be in a position. Yes. Okay. There. Can you? I think it should start showing up soon. The slides. Yeah. Now I
It's
will
yes.
play the slide. Yeah. I think now it's showing.
It's showing.
It hasn't yet come into the play mode. But what I thought, Swati, was that I would sort of put out the slides. I prepared a few, and then we can, have a conversation around that. And I also want to ask you questions because you showed me some very nice ways in which to create patterns, particularly strips through cutting, which I had not thought of earlier. So it was a good experience for me to learn. Uh, it's not changing, right? Somehow.
No,
Okay. Let's see what's happening. Okay, sorry. I'll have to do this again.
that's okay.
Um, yeah. Now is the first slide showing?
Not yet.
Not yet. Not yet. Yeah. Now it should be fine. Yeah. Now.
Yes, it's coming.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
we can see it.
Yeah. So, in fact, I'd like to speak about some of the things on the first slide. Um, I've put sort of some examples. One is of a flower, because one of the things that I feel is that symmetry is a really nice way in which, as I said, you wear the spectacles of symmetry, the lens of symmetry, and then you start looking at everything through it. Sometimes it's a bit disconcerting because, particularly when I get involved in, doing things related to symmetry, it stays with me for some time. And then, as I'm walking on the road and I'm looking at the tiles on the pavement, or I'm looking at what people are wearing, the grills on windows, and so on and so forth. So you can kind of find examples in architecture, nature, monuments, textiles, the beehives, the shape, the hexagonal tiling kind of thing that's there in beehives and so on. So very quickly, so I have some wallpaper patterns here, and the one in the middle is actually from a sari. It's the pallu of a sari, and the little strips here. The one on top, I think, is from one of the museums where I'd seen this. And again, the second one at the bottom is also a textile pattern taken from one of the fabrics which were there in a museum. This is a flower which you find kind of everywhere. And the last example that I have down there is a embroidered cushion. So, you can sort of see examples of symmetry everywhere. And so, while we are having a multi log on symmetry, I think, symmetry is kind of, to me, it's something which is very, very universal. And so, I just want to remind our viewers about how to think about symmetry intuitively. So any object. I mean, we'll be concentrating largely on what can be drawn on a sheet of paper or can be seen within a plane. But otherwise, you can think of symmetry as applying to any object in space. And the whole idea is that you think of the object as occupying a particular space. So on paper, it might, you can, if it's a planar object, you could draw the outline of the object. If it's a three-dimensional object, there's a hole in space which that object fits, right? So we can think of symmetry as an action that is done on the object and which leaves the viewer, so suppose somebody is seeing you do things to the object, but at the time when you've done your action, they've closed their eyes. Then when they open it, they feel nothing has been done to the object. So what are those actions which leave the object in exactly the same state and position as it started with? And that action would be called a symmetry. So that's a very intuitive idea of what a symmetry is, and it's something that can be used constantly to think whether a particular thing that's been done to the object is a symmetry or not, right? And similarly, if they feel that something has been done to the object and it's not back in the original place, then that is not a symmetry. So, for example, if we just look at the square, so what I've done here really is um, drawn, it's like having an outline of the square, which is the outer ABCD, and the inner part is the cutout. And people can do this at home on their notebooks, and if they want to do rotations, the rotations, you need to identify the point about which you'll rotate, and the axis of rotation is perpendicular to the plane of the square. So if you think of putting that cutout on your notebook and poking a pencil through the center, then you can just rotate the square about that point, maybe in the anti-clockwise direction, and see when does it come back to the same outline. And you can check quite easily that only the 90-degree rotation, 180-degree rotation, and the 270-degree rotation would work. And similarly, if you're looking for lines about which, if you fold the square, the cutout that you have, the two paths should match, then you'll realize that there are just four lines which work. So the by midpoints of the sides AD and BC, when they're linked, so we have this vertical dotted line called LV that I've marked, or LH, or the two diagonals, right? So in fact, there are just 8 symmetries of a square. Half of them are rotations and half of them are reflections. And we see that this is a something very typical of regular, what are called regular n-gons, which means that it's a n-sided figure whose sides are all of equal length, and whose interior angles are all the same. So the three-sided regular n-gon is your equilateral triangle. The four-sided regular n-gon is a square, and similarly we have regular pentagons, hexagons, and so on. And in each of these cases, the n sides tells you how many symmetries will be there. So if it's a regular n-gon, then it turns out that it will have n rotations and n reflections as its symmetry. Now, what is not a symmetry? So here's a picture of an equilateral triangle. So the original, I have two triangles here. The original one is the red one, and the blue one was kept underneath the red one, and it's been rotated 90 degrees. And you see that the blue and the red are not coinciding. So a 90-degree rotation is not a symmetry of a equilateral triangle. In fact, you'll see that 0 degrees, 120-degree, and 240-degree rotations are what will work. So that's just a little bit about, how to think about symmetry, how to identify what a symmetry is and what is not. Now, one of the things that came up, Swati, when we were discussing this earlier was, and I think Sneha was the one who asked this, and it immediately struck me as something that one should discuss, which is that, the point is when you apply a symmetry, and one symmetry and then follow it up by another, right? Uh, so if you intuitively think about it, so you've done one action of the object which keeps the object looking exactly where it is and so on, and the second one is following. Now, that together is again a symmetry, right? A symmetry followed by a symmetry is again a symmetry. So, the marking of the vertices that I showed in the um, case of the square is only to keep track of the symmetries. Otherwise, how do you know something has been done, right? How do you describe the actions which are going to be your symmetries if you can't track them? Now, in that context, the issue, I think the thing that Sneha asked is, Okay, so I apply, say, a 180-degree rotation, or maybe a one particular reflection first, and then another reflection, say maybe the horizontal one and then the vertical one. Is the effect the same as the vertical one applied first and then the horizontal one? In other words, when you're applying one symmetry after the other, does the order matter? And the answer
Not the
is yes.
commutative.
They commutative, yeah. So when we do addition between numbers, we know that it doesn't matter whether we do 2 plus 3 or 3 plus 2. So the question is that if I have one symmetry, say I call it R, and then I follow it by another symmetry which I call T, then is that the same as applying T first and then R? And unfortunately, it's not always the case that they're going to be equal. So I have a little example here, which demonstrates this in a, I don't remember what I've put. So probably, yeah, the square, right? So I've taken the 90-degree rotation first. So when you do the 90-degree rotation, the vertex A will come to where B is, B goes to where C is, C goes to where D is. And that's the picture that we have here. The square is actually, I've actually rotated the square and got this. So you can see that the vertices have switched positions. And then suppose I fold this outline, this cutout. If I fold it along that dotted line, which is the horizontal reflection, then what you'll find is the A and D match up, B and C match up. In terms of reflection, what that means is A goes up, A goes to where D is, D comes to where A is, B goes to where C is, and C comes to where B is. Now, if you look at this final position, you'll see that A and C are where they were originally, but B and D have switched. So this is like the reflection. If you reflect about the diagonal AC, then you get to this position. So you see that if you apply the 90-degree rotation first on a square and then the horizontal reflection, the net result is the same as doing the reflection about the diagonal AC. And now let's see what happens if I do it the other way around. So that means I'm going to apply the horizontal reflection first and then the 90-degree rotation. So I start out with my original square. I apply the horizontal reflection first. So A has come to where B is. A and B switch, C and D switch. So that's what happened here. And then I do a 90-degree rotation, and you'll see A will go to where D is, D will go to C, C will go to B, and B will come to A. Okay, so that's the final position. But this is not the same as the one above, right?
Yeah.
Because
The diagonal switched.
the diagonal switched, exactly. So now you have the net result is the reflection about the other diagonal. So in general, uh, symmetries are not commutative. So that was one of the things that came up when we were discussing it. So it would be interesting to see if there are figures for which all the symmetries commute, right?
Yeah.
So there are figures like that. So it'll be nice for children to maybe try and draw some of these, or see if they
Yeah.
can figure out something where things will actually commute nicely.
Yeah.
So
I mean, this is the scope for them to, have an adventure, because this is where textbook, etc., cannot help because they don't have the answer.
yeah,
It's not
exactly.
known.
Yeah,
Okay.
but
I mean,
but the
human civilization knows, but their world, a
yeah,
teacher may not
exactly.
know, or so.
Yeah. And but the nicest thing with symmetry is you can actually do it with your hand and figure out.
Yes.
you
Yes.
know
Yes.
so it's I mean, of course there are ways in which you can remove the square from the picture, just look at it as what's happening to the vertices, and you go into a level of abstraction which is higher. But the point is that you still have that the cutout and the outline, and you can just play with it. So the
Yeah.
hint I'm going to give to people who are watching in case they want to try it out is, look at the rectangle and see what happens there. You know, typically you would assume that it will have fewer symmetries than the square, right? Because it has only opposite sides which are equal and parallel, and they need their if you look at a rectangle which is not a square, then there have to be the length and the breadth have to be different. So so typically you would assume that you will have fewer symmetries then, but I think it'd be a nice thing for people to explore how many symmetries are there, what happens when you apply. And since it's a smaller number, in the square we have 8 symmetries. So even figuring out what do you get when you apply one after the other becomes can mean calculating 8 times 8, 64 different things. But for a rectangle, it's nice, smaller number, so
Yeah.
it might be much easier. Swati, now I want to. So we've so far only looked at objects which seem to have only finitely many symmetries, right? So for a square or an equilateral triangle, a regular n-gon, I said that we have just two n symmetries. So one other thing which would be nice for people to think about is that these are what are called finite figures, which means that I can draw them on my notebook and put them in like I can draw a rectangle outside and it's sitting inside that rectangle, so it's occupying a finite area in that sense. So is there a finite figure which has infinitely many symmetries?
I think that would be the circle, right?
Yeah, so it's the circle, but you can have variations on that also, in the sense that you can't obviously. So you can have things in which there are concentric circles,
Uh-huh.
and that is again something which will have infinitely
Yes.
many symmetries. So
Yes.
that's
Yes.
again something nice to know, that every diameter you can reflect about, and you can uh, take
Rotate
an
by
action
any angle.
by any angle and so on. And in
Yeah.
fact, you can, in the circle you could draw your regular n-gon. The circle will circumscribe your regular n-gon,
Yeah.
and then you can see therefore that this smaller subcollection of symmetries of this regular n-gon is sitting in a special way inside the symmetries of the circle, because if you have a circle circumscribing your regular n-gon, then the symmetries of the regular n-gon will also be symmetries of your circle.
Yes. Yes.
But there's a closure that's happening in this finite collection. So it in our at the higher level, this is something very special. The collection of symmetries has some special properties which we call a group, and this little one is then called a subgroup. So
Mm-hmm.
it's something nice to discover as well in a very visual way, right? That this thing. So next, I'm going to move, since we've talked about infinitely many symmetries. Uh, the next thing that comes to one's mind is that can we have things that we can draw on the page, well, on an infinite page, I would say, which uh, you know where we can again talk about symmetry, and but maybe it's somewhat special. So I'm going to talk about strip patterns and freeze patterns very briefly, and let's just go into that and see what's there.
So you're bringing in translation.
I'm going to bring in translation because that's the way in which we actually construct it.
Yeah.
So, what is a strip pattern? In fact, the way I would define a strip pattern really is through its construction. So you choose any nice design that you like, right? A finite design, finite planar motif, as we call it, and you just think of your having a stamp made out of that motif. And children learn the number line in school, right? So you put your integers equally spaced on the number line. So everywhere that you have an integer, that becomes the center of your motif stamp. So you put a stamp there, and then you go do that all along your number line, and you might get something like this, right? So I've used a smiley stamp here, and I've placed it equidistant left and right, and it's continuing infinitely. So you can see I've actually I've tried to give a sense of the infinite by having a bit of the smiley poke out of my screen
Yeah,
here,
yeah.
right?
I mean,
So,
it's
so this is
because
a
you said number line, this is making me think about arithmetic progression and, you know, modular arithmetic also, in a,
um, that
in a
would be
sense.
quite interesting to see how we could bring that in, but definitely, I mean, in my mind, suppose I had to track the symmetries of such a strip pattern, right? How would I track it? Because for a square, I know if I know where the vertices are going, I know where the square, what's happening to the square. But here I have infinitely many smileys, and each smiley has two eyes. There's a left one and a right one.
Yeah,
So basically, you have to, like, I would mark if a smiley is on the zero of the number line, so I would call it smiley zero, and I would also mark the point where the two eyes are, because
yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's
You know,
important. You know,
coordinates of the eyes.
coordinates of the eyes for the 0th smiley, and then the
Yeah,
first smiley, second, the
yeah,
-1th, -2th,
yeah,
and so on. And
yeah,
then it becomes easier to sort of see what might happen when you're trying to find what the actions are, which are going to leave this strip pattern looking exactly the way it is, right? So the point is, we learned about reflections and rotations. So does this thing have any reflections, reflection symmetries which would work? See, I mean, the horizontal line is not going to work. So
no,
suppose I have a horizontal line which cuts through the smiley, that's not going to work, because then the eyes would come down and the mouth would go up, and obviously it's not going to look exactly like it did before. But as you pointed out, the vertical line, so the vertical line can go through the middle of the smiley,
yeah, through
right?
the
So
nose.
through the nose. I mean, where the nose should have been, rather. The smiley doesn't have a nose, but there, and then there's another place also it can go. So while
In
people
between
think
the
about
faces.
in between the faces, exactly, go like bisect the space
Yeah,
between the
yeah,
two
yeah,
faces and the thing. So in general, apart from what there could be vertical lines of reflection. If there's a horizontal line of reflection, it has to bisect the strip pattern horizontally. This one doesn't have. Um, you could have rotations as well. See, the 0 degree rotation is always there for everything. Like, that's called the identity symmetry, or
hmm.
the nicer word is do nothing.
Yes,
Uh, it's the do
lazy
nothing rotation.
symmetry.
It's a lazy symmetry, right? So that's always there. Now the question is that if you wanted to have a, a rotational symmetry of the uh, strip, which is not 0 degrees, then the only one possible, because the strip has this left-right marching
Hmm.
condition, is if you can do a 180-degree
Yeah,
rotation,
yeah,
right? And in this, again, the 180-degree rotation will not work, because it basically the mouth goes up and the eyes come down, right?
yeah,
So so we've looked at the rotations and the reflections, but by the way in which a strip pattern is constructed, there is this really nice symmetry called the translation, which you had mentioned earlier. So basically, it's like I give a command to the smileys, step one, move one space to your left or move one space to your right. And then if they do that, so if the 0th position smiley moves to the first position moves to the second moves to the third, and so on. And similarly, -1 would move to 0, -2 would move to -1. You'll see that the strip pattern is going to look exactly like it did before. And
Yeah.
that unit by which they move to the left or to the right, I will call the one they move to the right as my translation. So if they move to the left, it's like doing the reverse of that translation, or what we call inverse of the translation. So typically a strip pattern can have a reflection, can have rotations, it will always have translations. Okay, that is inherent in every strip
Hmm.
pattern, that it has to have translations
Yeah.
because of its nature, the way it is constructed. And then you can, if you have a reflection followed by a translation in the direction parallel to the line of reflection, right? So if we had a horizontal reflection in our strip pattern, and we also have translation, then if you apply one after the other, it turns out that that new position which the coordinates move to, even though the strip pattern looks exactly the same, that is not achieved either by reflections or rotations or translations. So we in fact end up having a new kind of symmetry, which is then called a glide reflection. So it's like you glide a bit and then you reflect. So you glide
Can
and
we see
reflect.
some examples?
Yeah, I'll show you some a little later, but right now, so this was one of the lines of reflection, the other one, and this is the translation unit for this particular thing. And what I want to point out is I've marked these two lines in two different colors, I mean, and pattern also. And the reason is that these are two different types of lines of reflection, right? Because we say that two lines of reflection are of the same type if a symmetry can move one line to the other. So you'll have infinitely many such red lines, right,
Yeah.
between any two smiley points.
Yeah.
So if this was my zeroth smiley and this was my first smiley, this is like a L01, line 01. And whereas this one is different, it's like so if this was 0, this is -1, so this is the midpoint of, so I'll call it M -1 to indicate that it's going through the middle of the smiley. So you'll have infinitely many middle lines of reflection, and you'll have infinitely many red lines of reflection. That means infinitely many reflections, infinitely many translations, because instead of doing move one unit t, I can say move two units, move three units, and each of them gives you a translation. And similarly, I can say move in the left hand side direction 1 unit. So that's like a -1, minus t, -2t, -3t, and so on. And so again, you have infinitely many translations. So this is like a basic difference. So the kind of figures that we looked at earlier, like squares or equilateral triangles, we found that they had only finitely many symmetries. But the moment a translation comes in, you'll have infinitely many symmetries. So that's one of the things. And Swati, maybe, I mean, I'll show, there's a nice way in which you can classify these strip patterns. So maybe I'll show that, and then we could you could probably do some magic with scissors and paper and show how we can create strip patterns, maybe, and then I will continue with what I have here. Okay, so there are 7 types of strip patterns, and I've used the terminology that Conway has for classifying these. So he uses a footprint. So if we've all played this game of Stapu where you hop on one foot. So if you're hopping on one foot equal distance, then that is the first pattern. It has only translations and it's called the hop pattern. This one is a step pattern. So, you go right, left, right, left, right, left. And the point is that in here, the basic motif consists of these two, like this, the top footprint and this bottom first footprint. That is your basic motif. Okay? And then that is translated to this is translated to the next one, and so on. And this has both translations and glide reflections, and you can kind of see this, right? You were asking about glide reflections. So you see, the if you look at the translation length, it's this much, this whole, start with the foot, bottom of the foot here, go all the way to the bottom of the foot here. That's the unit of the translation that we have.
Yeah.
But when you want to see the glide reflection, think of this bottom footprint moving half the distance
Yeah.
and then flipping. So what would happen if that we do this half, the length of the one unit of translation, we do half of that and then reflect horizontally, then this foot would go up here, this foot would come down here, this foot would go up here, this foot would come down here, and so the strip pattern looks exactly as it did, and that's your glide reflection happening there. And then, of course, this one is called sidle. It would be a bit difficult for us to. I mean, it's like keeping your 2 feet like this, and then
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
your stamp, and then it's stamped again, and then it's
Yeah.
stamped again, and so on. So
Yeah.
this one has translations and vertical reflections, and then we have this what is called the spinning footprint. It's got translations and 180-degree rotations. Then something called the spinning sidle. So it has translations, 180-degree rotations, and glide reflections. And then we come to the jump. Jump is easy to
Yeah.
picture in terms of actually a movement. So we have translations, horizontal reflections, and glide reflections here. And finally, the seventh pattern is one where everything is there. So it
Mm.
has translations, 180-degree rotations, vertical reflections, horizontal and glide reflections. So in this, the basic motif is all four of these.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the first four footprints are your basic motif,
Yeah.
and then that is your stamp which you're stamping at
Yeah.
equal distance. So maybe, Swati, I will stop sharing for a bit now, and maybe you can show some of your uh, paper cutting
Yeah.
to
Sure. So we have about 15 minutes. So let's show you some of the fold and cut. Now, for example, this is a simple pattern. Okay. Now you can see that it has symmetry. Okay. Like the smiley, it is actually very much like the
the
smiley. It
smiley.
has
Yeah, yeah,
this kind of. Okay. Let's
exactly.
think of this as the missing noses.
Yes, correct. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, 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 yeah.
And on the other hand, for example, this one, this has, uh, this is
This
more
is
like the
the last one, I think. It will have
last one. It has
everything.
all kinds of symmetry. Like if you
Yeah,
flip
yeah,
it,
yeah,
like
yeah,
if I actually flip it this way, you know,
yeah. So
it
that's
still looks
again
the same,
exactly, exactly.
right?
Yeah,
If I
yeah.
rotate it,
Again,
it
looks the
still
same.
looks the same. So, it
So yeah,
has that kind of,
this is that the last pattern that we had, pattern 7, which
yes,
had
yes,
everything.
yes.
Is one of
Now,
those.
these are done very simple. So, you need to just take any strip of paper and you fold it. Now, because paper has a thickness, to get the best of it, it is better, if you can fold it in a zigzag way, and
Yeah.
then essentially, make any cut,
And
whatever you
when
want.
you 1 minute, Swati, when you do that zigzag, it should be equal distance. The
Yes,
folds,
yes, yes,
that should
yes,
be equal distance, right?
yes, yes, yes. Other, see, and you can guess that, that translation unit that you are mentioning, na Gita.
That will
You can
come from
figure out
the
that
where
has
you're
something to do
holding.
with this.
Yeah, that will come
Yeah.
from that.
So see,
Exactly.
I just made one cut, and let's see what we get.
Nice.
Okay, this
So
is
this is
kind
like
of
the
like the smiley.
mouth of the smiley.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
See,
So
again,
this will again have vertical things and translation.
yes. So now let me do one more. So here, let me fold it like this first, and
Hmm.
then fold. Okay.
Okay.
So if you want to get the zigzag, so you know, it's a good idea to just halve it and then halve again, so that
And then
you
fold.
get
Then
equal
you know
one.
where
So
to fold.
yeah, so you get 1/4. Okay, so this is how I have done it. Okay,
Hmm.
now I will zigzag it up.
Hmm.
See, the moment we talk about precision in math, the moment you are doing it actually, you need precision, because if you are not precise, if
Yeah.
these don't line up, the end product immediately tells you, you get
That. Yeah.
immediate feedback that it's not done correctly. So it has this self-corrective aspect, which I think
Yeah.
is again very important,
Exactly.
pedagogically.
Exactly. I
Okay.
mean, this reminds me, there is this dabba in my house, a little box in which I think some cheese or something had come, and the
Uh-huh.
lid looks almost like a square, right? So if you have a square lid, it doesn't matter how you put it; it'll always close the box at the bottom. But because this is not quite a square, it's slightly missing being a square. Only when I turn it in the right way does it fit the bottom of my the thing. So
Yeah, yeah.
even though my eyes sometimes think, oh, this looks just like a square, when I have to actually close it, I realize it's not a square.
So
Oh, yeah, show this. Oh, this looks very pretty.
yeah, so now
Uh,
you see this
yeah,
one, because I had made this fold, now it has
yeah,
that
yeah.
symmetry, right?
Right, 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 right. So
Yeah.
this one has, so your basic motive here is three of these objects, right? It's that um,
Yeah, this one
whole
and these
arrow
two,
and these
and they
two
keep
together.
repeating.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah,
However, see, in all of this, there was this line symmetry, right?
this one
There was
doesn't
no
have.
way to avoid it. Now,
Yeah,
play, right? So, I was having fun and I did make this, and now you see, this one doesn't have a lot of, like, there are some line symmetries, but not
yeah. It
all.
doesn't. It doesn't have the one going. See, but the thing in this is that your basic motif now is two of them together.
Yes,
Otherwise you won't have a
yes.
translation
So,
which is
this
going.
is like that, that siddle.
Yeah, so let me see. So if I take two of these as the basic unit,
Yeah.
then actually both those lines will come. It's when you take it, see, because the line between, so
Yes. So
two of these, that will
these will
work.
be, yeah, but not through this.
Not through, but through doesn't, because here it's both those together, which is your basic motive.
Yeah.
There isn't
So
something like
these two
through
are
it.
different. See, if you remember this one,
Yeah, this one
is
will have.
yeah. So this is different from this one, and you have
uh,
to, it's like
yeah,
a higher order thinking of how do you get this using fold
right,
and
yeah,
cut.
yeah, sure, sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
except yeah, so here, I mean, it's very, how did you do this cut? It
so
looks very
okay.
intriguing.
Okay, so first cut was done, with all the fold. Okay,
Yeah.
so that is how the first cut was done.
Okay.
Okay,
Ah,
then I basically opened it up, okay, and did the next cut.
right, right, right. Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
essentially, the thing you are saying now, this fun and all of those things, I just had that in order to,
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, so the thing is that it would what would be nice also is, we've shown those seven strip patterns, and we could kind of see which ones can actually be made using paper cutouts or
yes,
not.
yes,
That would also be interesting.
yes. Like
Maybe I
hop,
can.
I think would be very difficult.
Yeah, yeah. So maybe I can show a little bit through GeoGebra to see if how maybe jump, in fact, right? The jump pattern. Let's see
Yeah,
how
yeah,
that
yeah,
could be made very quickly.
yeah.
So let me see if I can share that. And so that's another way in which you can actually create these, strip patterns. So here, can you see my GeoGebra screen,
Yeah, it's
Swati?
coming.
Is it showing? Yeah.
Yes.
So this is a basic footprint, and you can actually in GeoGebra, use. There's an insert image from file, so you could use that to bring whatever image you want into your GeoGebra screen. And GeoGebra is freely available. You can download it, and I think they may also have something which can work on mobiles. So basically, I have this footprint which is identified by these two points, right? That point A and point B, whose coordinates are given here. And GeoGebra has this nice thing about, you can reflect about a line, you can reflect about a point, you can reflect about a circle. Of course, we'll be using reflect about a line, the kind of symmetries that we are talking about. There's translation by a vector, rotation about a point, anti-clockwise direction, axis perpendicular to the plane of the, uh, the object, and reflection about a line. These are the things with which you can play to try and create your thing. So here, if I want to create this pattern, so it's like reverse engineering, right? So I have to kind of figure out how to make this pattern, and in the process, you will discover what symmetries are there. So the point is, this is like the footprint I have. So I have to reflect it to get the bottom footprint. So I'll use reflection about a line, and if you see, to reflect about a line, you have to select the object which you want to reflect, which in our case will be this footprint, and then the line of reflection. So I choose this, and then the line of reflection I want is the x-axis. So I'm going to choose the x-axis and then this and reflect. Okay, so let's do that. So let me reflect about a line. So I choose the object and then I choose the line. And you can see it's reflected, right? And now I want to make several copies of both the top and the bottom. So that's like my translation coming into the picture. So I've already made the vector by which I want to translate. I want this to be parallel to the x-axis so that it comes in a nice strip. So I choose again, I go here, I choose translate by a vector. I choose my object and then the vector, and I get the next one. So I can do this to the bottom footprint. I can do this again to the top footprint, do this to the bottom footprint, do this to the top one, and we can go on. Okay, and now if I want to, get the footprints on the other side, then I have to take the negative of this vector. So I can get the negative of this vector by, I could use reflect about point. So I can use this and then reflect about this point, and I've got the negative direction. And so now I can do translate by vector again and translate it by this vector u dashed. And now I've made it in the other direction as well. right? So we've created this jump pattern, and here at the bottom I have this jump pattern. Of course, I've got the horizontal line of reflection and the translation mark, but I can show very quickly that if I've just placed it on top here, and I can ask to reflect about the x-axis, and you'll see what will happen then. I mean, it will actually reflect, and if you just concentrate on the pattern, you will see it's the same. Okay, so let's just try that. So reflect about a line. Now my object is this thing. Hopefully I've selected the right object, and my line is this x-axis. No, it's still selecting my footprint. I'm sorry, maybe I should move this. Let me delete this, and let me move this thing below and see. Yeah, okay. So now it should work. So this is the object I'm choosing, and this is the line about which, or maybe not. Maybe I'm not being particularly good with this. Uh, but if you actually, yeah, now maybe this will work. I select this.
Geeta, you can delete the three footprints which are kind of alone and try to put it there.
Uh, yeah, I could do that. 1 minute. Let me just fix this line.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that also will work.
now the line is fixed. And so
Yeah,
now I can do the reflect about line. I choose this and I reflect it about this line, and you'll see, I mean, I've not the line should have gone exactly halfway, but
yeah,
since my line has been slightly, as you said, it's self-correcting, right? So this
Mhm.
tells me that the line that I have chosen was not really the horizontal bisector, because if I had done that, then even that slight difference between the two strips wouldn't have come, right? So
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
it's fun to play around with these things, and to be able to see what happens when you do this. And I very quickly want to mention the wallpaper patterns, and then I want to show some of the lovely wallpaper patterns that you have created using dot paper, and I think we'll probably run out of time at that point.
yeah. We
So
have few minutes, so we
yeah,
I think we may be able to squeeze that in.
yeah, so let me, are you able to see my presentation now? Has it come up?
Yes,
Yeah,
it's coming.
yeah. So wallpaper patterns. So wallpaper patterns, you can think of them as strip patterns being stacked one on top of the other infinitely. But at
Yeah,
the same time, when you want to study wallpaper patterns, you need to know what sort of basic grids can cover your plane. And it
yeah,
turns out that the only grids that can cover the plane, it's like, if you draw that same object again and again, whether it covers the plane entirely, is rectangle, square, equilateral triangle, hexagon, and parallelogram, which is non-rectangle. Okay, so these are the only ones which you can use to tile, what is called tiling of the plane. And usually, what happens when you want to study wallpapers is you've got to somehow figure out what the underlying grid was on which that wallpaper has been based. So I'm just going to quickly show pictures of each of them uh, with the grid. So this is like a rectangular non-square grid on which this wallpaper pattern has been made. Um, this one is made using equilateral triangle grid. So you can think of these stars as being placed at vertices of equilateral triangles, which have been drawn to cover the plane. This one is hexagon, this one is square, and this is using a non-rectangular parallelogram lattice. I'm going to very quickly show everyone the beautiful pictures that Swati has already made and shared. So she's used a triangle grid and then done a coloring to create this wallpaper pattern. This one she claims is
Yeah,
the
see,
kind
at
of thing that
every
was brought.
vertex, you should have, they should be kind of opposite to the red should be opposite, etc. But if you
Huh.
look below, you can see
Yeah,
the reds are not really opposite to each other. And I was
yeah,
trying to also follow, like, between every blue and red, there should be white, like they should
yeah, yeah,
alternate.
yeah, 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 correct.
So, yeah,
Yeah. So again, this is something which would be interesting to, you have these dots and then it's like a rangoli drawing on paper in a way, right?
yes,
So this one is particularly nice. I like the kind of free flowing
yeah.
curve that you've got here. Swati, but do you think that one needs to have some artistic talent before one can do this kind of thing, or can
That's
we?
the fun part. I think one should just uh, let oneself be free and explore,
Yeah,
frankly,
yeah, yeah.
and not worry
And
about,
also,
well,
as
how
you say,
artistic they are. it's
yeah,
it's actually quite therapeutic, frankly.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, the point is, if you not really manage to draw them identically, then you don't have to worry. You'll still have two translations, two different direction of translations in the wallpaper
Yeah,
pattern.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
you'll always have infinitely many symmetries.
Yes.
So whatever you do, you know.
Yeah.
But this is also nice. I think this is one of my favorite ones. There's
Yeah,
this
this is
nice.
like becoming greedy and trying to do, a quadrilateral which has no symmetry at all, and because all quadrilaterals tie, so
Huh,
therefore,
yeah, yeah, yeah. So there. I think that sort of ends my uh, the slides that were prepared, and so
So
yeah,
thank you
thanks.
both so much. I was absolutely fascinated, and you've given me a lot of hope because I am not naturally artistic, but I am impelled to try. I could literally see, our audience reaching for scissors when Swati did that, reaching for GeoGebra when you went and played with GeoGebra, and then back to dot sheets. So I think you've given people food for thought as well as stuff to do with their hands. And I think that's where the math happens because
Yes.
it's really, it's not just a mental activity. Um, I, I also liked, Geeta, that you were playing with GeoGebra in a way which said it's okay to make mistakes, it's okay to do trial and error.
Yeah, yeah.
And
That's
I,
that's absolutely the way I learned. I mean, I'm
yeah,
still learning.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah. Yeah.
it's so many pedagogical lessons were coming through, and I think overarching everything was this thing of having fun, creating beauty while you're having fun, creating a little bit of mess while you're having fun, and also learning to generalize because I could see some thoughts coming out all quadrilateral style, so many generalizations were coming out, and I think you both have proved very powerfully that a lot of learning can happen through play. Thank you both so much. And we look
Okay.
forward to more articles, more beauty.
Thanks so much. Bye bye.